The snow hadn't melted in weeks. Even as ravens flew with scrolls marked with the Stark seal, the winds never stopped howling through the grey stone towers of Winterfell. What once was a place of quiet honor and family duty had become something far colder, the center of power. The new capital of Westeros, Winterfell. They called it a mistake in the Reach, madness in dawn, an insult in King's Landing. But after the wars, the dragons, the walkers, the fire and the death, the realm was broken, and only the north remained standing, not untouched but undefeated. And in the end, power always bends toward the ones still breathing. Queen Sansa Stark sat on a throne carved from weirwood and ironwood, her red hair braided tightly, her expression like a frozen lake, still, smooth, but hiding a depth few could guess. She didn't want the crown, but want had nothing to do with it anymore. They sent another letter, Maester Therion muttered, clutching a parchment damp with snow. House Tyrell of Highgarden refuses to send grain. Again, Sansa's lips tightened just slightly. Did they offer a reason this time? They said their fields are frostbitten, and that their loyalty died with the south. A long silence passed. The northern lords stood behind her throne. Lord Umber, fierce and young, Lady Mormont's cousin hardened by loss. Sir Davos, older now, his hair whiter, stood to her right, not a northerner by birth, but one by choice. They grow bold, Davos said. The South always did have sharp tongues when they felt safe behind their roses and gold. Sansa's voice came quiet but clear. Then we must make them feel cold. Let them understand what it means to let the North feed them for years, then spit on our crown. None dared disagree. Not openly. She had won peace. She had ended the wars. She had brought down the Iron Throne and scattered its ashes into the snow. But she ruled from a place the South would never call home. And that made her power, even now, feel like theft in the eyes of many. The Lords of the Stormlands barely replied to her summons. The Martells had cloaked their silence in formality, but they never visited. And in the halls of old Lannister keeps, her name was still spoken like a curse. They thought a northern queen would be soft, cold, easy to break. They forgot what winter truly meant. Far south, in the golden halls of Old Town, whispers passed between wineglasses and candlelight. Lord Elric Tyrell, young and charming, hosted feasts with his bannermen, each more bitter than the last. She thinks she can wear a crown simply because the South lay in ashes? He sneered. Winterfell is not a capital. It's a crypt with wolves. His uncle, an aging knight with too many debts and not enough victories, leaned in. We don't have to kneel, Elric. The realm is fractured. If we unite, then we become traitors, a voice warned. It was Lady Vela Florent, sharp-eyed and quiet, always listening. And traitors don't get second chances with a Stark queen, Elric only smiled. She won't know until it's too late. And so the seeds were planted, under moonlight and under oaths, under cups of wine and under promises made with glances, not ink. The South would not kneel forever. In Winterfell, the snows grew deeper. In the South, the words grew darker, and between them roads froze, both literally and in spirit. Trade faltered. Messages delayed. The cold crown was heavy, but heavier still were the hands reaching to snatch it away. Queen Sansa looked out from the battlements of her ancient home, now a kingdom's heart. She had hoped for peace. She had hoped they would see reason, but Westeros never bowed easily. And in the shadow of every throne is someone waiting to burn it. The cold was worse than usual, even by northern standards. The winds whipped harder, and the snow came thick like silence pressing down on the land. But it wasn't just weather. It was tension, heavy, unspoken. In the great hall of Winterfell, the fire crackled, but no one felt warm. Sansa sat at the high table, listening, always listening. Her bannermen spoke of preparations, of stored grain, of reinforcing the Dreadfoot in case of siege. They spoke of loyalty, but their eyes spoke of fear. They saw it too. The South was no longer quiet. Sir Davos leaned close, voice low. There's talk from the Vale. Sansa barely moved. Lord still loyal. He hesitated. The Arryn boys groan. He wants more than valleys and skies now. They say he's forming a new council. A southern peace pact. But they've not invited us. Sansa let out a breath through her nose. So it begins. Robin Arryn had always been fragile, sickly, easily swayed. But now he wanted to be a kingmaker. Perhaps even a king. He wouldn't dare challenge her directly, not yet. But his hand would be in the rebellion when it rose. And it would rise. The South never accepted losing the capital. The idea that the ruling crown now lay on a redhead's head in the far north, in a castle surrounded by snow and old gods. It burned them from the inside. Farther south, in the Riverlands, a raven arrived in River Run. Lord Edric Tully, Sansa's cousin, read the message with shaking hands. A sealed scroll, no sigil, only the words, "The South remembers." To you, he knew what it meant. And worse, he knew the names attached to it. Baratheon, Tarly, Hightower, Redwine, even some phrase, those who had survived the wars and slipped away like rats in flood. Each had a reason to resent the North. Each had bled under Stark banners. Now they whispered in the dark again, spinning the same old lie that peace could be restored if only Winterfell fell. But this wasn't the old South anymore. There was no Iron Throne, no dragons, no gods watching, just silence and ambition. In the Reach, Lord Elric Tyrell walked through his rose gardens as snow began to dust the green leaves. Unnatural, unsettling. "Winter is poisoning us," he muttered. "They bring their snow, their silence, and their wolves, and call it peace." He turned to his sister, Lady Mira. "We need fire," he said. "Something loud enough to make the wolves howl." Mira tilted her head. "Assassins." He smiled faintly. Not yet. But something public. Something southern. A message he didn't need to explain. A week later, a grain caravan headed for the north was stopped on the King's Road. The men and women guarding it, Riverlanders, loyal to House Stark, were hung from trees. A scorched northern banner was left behind, and the barrels of grain were smashed open and burned, the ashes scattered in the mud. It was the first act of open defiance, not war. Not yet, but the signal was clear. In Winterfell, the news hit like a hammer. The silence in the war room was unbearable. "They want blood," muttered Lord Umber. "Let's give them some." "No," Sansa said. Her voice was steel. "They want us to lash out, to prove them right, that we're tyrants ruling from a cold tomb. We won't give them that." "But they've started," said Lady Mormont's cousin. "We cannot let it stand." "We won't," Sansa said. "But we strike in our way." "Not theirs?" Davos leaned in. "You have a plan." Sansa didn't blink. "We send a letter to Lord Edric in River Run. He still wavers. We remind him of the blood we share, and we offer protection from the very rebellion that courts him. And if he chooses them," Davos asked. Sansa's eyes darkened. "Then we let the wolves off the leash." Outside the castle, in the courtyards, northern soldiers trained with grim precision. Their blades didn't shine like the South's. Their armor wasn't polished. But their eyes were sharper than steel. War was coming, and this time it would be South that would feel the chill of winter. River Run always smelled of damp stone and river rot. Even in the summer months, the air was thick with moss and the sound of rushing water. But now, with the cold creeping farther south than it had in decades, the riverbanks were crusted with frost, and the halls of House Tully felt more like a tomb than a fortress. Lord Edric Tully sat alone, the letter from Winterfell trembling in his hand, not from fear but from weight, from the pull of duty, blood, and the gnawing fear of making the wrong choice in a kingdom that had no right ones left. You're with them, or you're not. That's what the note from House Tyrell had said. No sigils, no wax, just ink and threat. But Sansa's letter was something else entirely. She had written it herself, not a scribe. No cold formal words, just her voice. And it was that voice that haunted him now. "We are not your enemies. We are your kin. The South asked you to betray your blood. I ask you to remember it." Edric pressed his thumb to the parchment and stared at the fire. Outside, the bannermen argued, drank, and guessed which way the wind would blow. But he knew the truth already. There was no more middle ground. That same night, riders left Riverrun in two directions, one toward Winterfell, bearing a white flag and a promise of fealty. The other, cloaked and hidden, to warn the south that House Tully had made its choice. And just like that, the lines were drawn. In Highgarden, Lord Elric Tyrell slammed a goblet against the stone wall when the news reached him. "The trout chooses the wolf over the rose," he muttered, blood running down his knuckles. "Then let him drown in his own river." He wasn't alone in his rage. The Reach, the Stormlands and Dawn had already begun to gather. Small councils turned into war rooms. Messengers rode day and night. Supplies vanished from trade routes. Gold flowed in dark corners and in the ruins of Old King's Landing, still half buried under ashen memory. Voices began to whisper of rebuilding the South's power in the shadow of the old Iron Throne, but they didn't want to rebuild it for justice. They wanted it for vengeance. In Winterfell, Sansa read Edric's reply by the firelight. "House Tully stands with the North. Our swords are yours." She allowed herself a rare smile. "The river is ours," she said to Davos. "They've lost their bridge." He nodded, but worry pulled at the corners of his eyes. "Aye, but they're not building bridges anymore. They're building walls, alliances, and armies." Sansa stood and walked toward the map table. The parchment was worn, the ink fading, but the threats were more alive than ever. "The North has never ruled the South," she said. "Not truly. Even Aegon couldn't keep peace between these lands. But I don't seek peace anymore, Davos. I seek control." He studied her, the fire casting long shadows across her face. "Are you ready for what that means?" Sansa turned, eyes hard as ice. "They wanted a queen. They crowned me. Now they will serve me, or they will fall." Across the realm, the winds began to howl louder. In the Vale, Lord Robin Arryn formally pledged neutrality, but everyone knew that meant nothing. His coffers were open to the south. His eyrie would not open to the north. In Dawn, the Martells refused to send men, but they sent ships, quietly, unmarked, full of southern steel and bitter oaths, and in the shadows of the Blackwater, the first mercenaries began to arrive, soldiers of fortune from Essos, willing to fight for gold, not honor. A new coalition was rising. No one called it a rebellion yet. They named it the Restoration, but in the north they called it something else. Treason. That same week, Queen Sansa summoned her war council. "No more messengers, no more warnings. We march first," she said. "Before they gather, before they're ready." The lords shifted in their seats, surprised. "You want to attack?" asked Lady Reed. "Strike first?" Sansa nodded. "We send a force to take Harrenhal. Burn any southern banner flying above it. Let the Riverlands see that we defend what's ours." "And the south?" asked Sir Davos. She stared at the map. "At Highgarden, at Storm's End, at Sunspear. They want to test the cold. Then we bring winter to their gates." The North was going to war, and this time they weren't defending, they were conquering. The crows circled above Harrenhal before the fighting even began. A massive, ruined fortress with blackened stone towers and walls melted by dragonfire centuries ago. Harrenhal had long been a symbol of failed ambition. Every lord who tried to claim it had either died, gone mad, or disappeared into dust. But now it was something else, a gate. Whoever held Harrenhal held the Riverlands, and Sansa meant to hold it. Her banners arrived first, the direwolf of Stark, the roaring bear of Mormont, the sunburst of House Karstark. 5,000 northerners, hardened by years of frost and war, marched beneath snow-dusted skies. At their head rode Lord Cregan Stark, Warden of the North and Sansa's cousin. Young but grim, quiet but merciless. He was the sword of the North now, and Harrenhal was his target. When they arrived, they found it already taken. Southern forces had occupied the ruins. A mix of Reach soldiers with golden cloaks, some broken knights from the Stormlands, and worst of all, sellswords from Essos. Men who fought for coin and cared nothing for honor. They flew no kingdom's banner, just a black flag with a red coin in the center. Cregan didn't wait for diplomacy. At sunrise, The first arrows flew. Harrenhal screamed. The battle lasted 2 days. The southern forces had the walls, the archers, and the numbers. But they didn't have the cold. The northerners fought like shadows in the snow. They moved in silence, crept in during the night, and slit throats before the enemy could scream. Cregan led the final charge himself, riding through the shattered gate as his men poured through behind him. The sellswords scattered first, not out of fear, but because their coinmaster had already fled. The Reach soldiers stood longer, but they broke when the bear banners of Mormont came crashing through the western tower, roaring like demons of old. By dusk, Harrenhal burned again. Its halls ran red. Its walls cracked beneath the weight of war. The last southern knight inside the keep tried to parley, but Greggan Stark answered him with steel through the throat. He hung the man's body from a scorched tower and let the wind carry the message. The North had arrived. In Winterfell, news of the victory came by Raven. Sansa read the message aloud to her court. Harrenhal is ours. The South bleeds! The lords cheered. Cups were raised. Songs began to form in the great hall, half-drunk verses about Cregan the Iron Wolf and the Queen who brought the snow. But Sansa didn't smile. She knew this was only the beginning. For every castle taken, 10 more enemies would rise. And in the south, they had already begun to. In Storm's End, the Baratheons declared open rebellion. Lord Aric Baratheon, broad-shouldered and full of fire, stood before a gathering of houses and burned a northern banner in the castle yard. The Starks rule with silence and snow. We answer with storm and steel. Cheers followed. So did swords. A fleet was prepared. Letters were sent to Dorne and the Reach. The war had begun in full. In Highgarden, Lord Elric Tyrell received the news of Harrenhal's fall with cold fury. They want war, he said. Then let them feel what southern fire tastes like. He summoned every bannerman, every able knight. The gold of the Reach flowed like a river into ships, siege weapons, and the hands of mercenaries with no allegiance but coin. He called it the Southern Pact, a coalition of the remaining noble houses, loyal not to a single king or queen, but to one mission: drive the North back into its snow-covered grave. In the Vale, Robin Arryn made his move. He didn't declare rebellion. No, he was smarter than that. He claimed neutrality, but he quietly closed the mountain passes to northern allies and opened his treasury to southern lords. When a northern envoy attempted to pass through the Bloody Gate, they were found days later, their bodies shattered on the rocks below. Bandits, the Vale claimed. Tragic, really. Sansa received that message too. She said nothing at first, but that night, she stood in front of the weirwood tree in the Godswood, her fingers cold against its bark. They think we're like them, she whispered. That we'll hesitate. That we'll play by old rules. The wind didn't answer, but the silence around her felt like agreement. The map had changed now. Winterfell held the north and much of the Riverlands. The south had rallied under a new banner of defiance. The middle was scorched earth waiting to be claimed or buried, and Harrenhal, it stood like a bleeding wound, half claimed, half destroyed. A line in the dirt neither side would let go. The war had started, and this time there would be no Targaryen to burn it all down. Only wolves and storms. Snow fell on Winterfell like ash from an old fire. The wind howled through the towers and walls. But it wasn't the cold that made the halls feel tight and restless. It was the silence that followed war, the kind that crept in between battles, just long enough to make men fear what came next. Sansa stood over the war table, staring at the shifting markers. Harrenhal was taken. The Riverlands were mostly secured, but the South had answered, and their answer was loud. Reports had flooded in over the last few days. Storm's End was fully mobilized. The Baratheon fleet had begun raiding northern supply lines along the western coast. Dozens of villages were burned. Refugees from the Riverlands were arriving by the hundreds, teeth chattering, faces hollowed out from hunger and fear. The Reach had sent gold to the Stormlords. Dorne had begun building a secret passage through the Red Mountains to move troops north unseen. And worst of all, the Vale has betrayed us, Sir Davos said quietly, placing the torn Stark sigil on the table. They sent men to Storm's End last night. Robin Arryn's neutrality was a lie. Sansa didn't speak. Not for a long while. Everyone in the room knew what this meant. With the Vale turning, the north was surrounded. West, south, east, all hostile. The only path left was forward. Through war, Lord Umber slammed his fist into the table. Cowards! The lot of them! We should have burned the Eyrie when we had the chance. The Eyrie cannot be burned, Lady Reed said. It's carved into a bloody mountain. Then we tear the mountain down, he growled. Davos turned toward Sansa. What now, Your Grace? She didn't look up. Not yet. Her voice came low, cold, careful. We let the South gather. We let them believe they've gained the advantage. And then, Davos asked. Sansa finally met his eyes. Then we take the Vale. The room went silent. Lady Mormont's cousin blinked. You mean to strike east? Yes, Sansa said, moving the carved direwolf on the board. They expect us to go south, to defend the Riverlands, but they've forgotten the mountain passes. The ones the Boltons used during the rebellion. The ones we closed, but never collapsed. She looked around the room. We send a force through the Frostfang Trail. They'll reach the Eyrie in 2 weeks. It will not be easy. But the Arryn boys' court is weak, arrogant. They won't see it coming. Davos frowned. And if they do, then we bury them in their own snow. Far away in the golden halls of Storm's End, Lord Arryk Baratheon raised a goblet high. To the fall of Winterfell, the southern lords roared their approval. Wines from Dorne, cheeses from the Reach, fruit from the Arbor, all laid out in a show of strength. They called it a war council, but it was more of a celebration. Elric Tyrell stood near the edge of the room, arms folded. His green eyes swept over the crowd with thinly veiled disgust. They laughed like this is over, he muttered. Beside him stood Mira Tyrell, his sister, ever watchful. Because they don't know what's coming. You think the North will just lay down? Elric asked. No, but I think they'll bleed. And we only need them to bleed long enough. A young Dornish lord leaned into the conversation. And if they don't, what if they strike first? And if they don't, what if they strike first? Elric smirked. Then we'll bury them beneath their own ambition. But that night, a rider came. Dusty, breathless, half-frozen, he brought no wine. No cheers, just a letter, one that made Elric Tyrrell's face turn pale. It read, The North marches east. The Eyrie is next. The wolves are already in the mountains. In the Vale, Robin Arryn sat in his court, sipping sweet milk, his lips stained white, his hands trembling. He had thought himself safe, high above the world, unreachable in his sky castle. But now riders had gone missing. The mountain tribes had fled, and one of his guards had found a pile of northern cloaks near the moon door, meaning they were already inside the Vale. The North had come, and they hadn't knocked. Robin tried to send for help, but the Ravenry had been sabotaged. His lords were squabbling. His soldiers were outnumbered. And for the first time since his betrayal, the boy lord realized what fear actually tasted like. In Winterfell, Sansa received the confirmation by Raven, the mountain is ours. The moon door will open to the wolf. Sansa closed her eyes. It was the first real blow they'd dealt since Harrenhal, and it would not be the last. But something still gnawed at her. A second raven arrived an hour later, one she hadn't expected. No sigil, no sender. Just a single line, your brother rides south. And he does not wear your banner. She froze, her heart didn't race. It sank, Jon. She didn't sleep that night. The fire in her chambers burned low, but Queen Sansa Stark didn't move to feed it. She just sat there, staring at the raven's message resting on her table like it carried a ghost. Your brother rides south. And he does not wear your banner. It didn't say Jon Snow, it didn't need to. Only one man fit that warning. A Stark in blood, if not name. A man who had once been king in the north, before he gave it away. A man who had left her behind to fight his own war, and then never returned. Jon had vanished after the wall, after the wars, after the death. She had heard rumors that he went north of the wall, that he lived with the free folk, that he'd found peace in the land of endless snow. But now he was riding south. toward war. Without her, without the wolf banner. And that meant only one thing. He had chosen a side, and it wasn't hers. In the Riverlands, the fighting had grown worse. Southern skirmishers struck at villages loyal to House Tully. Bridges were burned. Caravans disappeared into the fog. And even though Harrenhal still flew the direwolf, the land around it was bleeding. Lord Edric Tully rode north to meet with Sansa's generals. His face was hollow, his voice hoarse. "The people are starving," he said. "We need more supplies, more men." Davos rubbed his temples. "We don't have more to give. We've already stretched our grain lines as far as they'll go, and every week the south grows bolder," Edric snapped. "They burn and vanish, like ghosts. The Reach is paying them," Lady Reed muttered. "This isn't war. It's a siege disguised as raids." Sansa arrived late to the council, her eyes sunken, her mood unreadable. "Send food," she said quietly. "Your Grace, we don't. Take it from the Dreadfort if you must. Pull it from Last Hearth. I don't care where it comes from. We feed the Riverlands, or we lose them." No one argued, but they all saw it, the flicker of worry behind her command. Not just for the Riverlands, for something bigger, for Jon. Far beyond the battles, through snow and silence, a man rode south with no sigil on his cloak. Jon Snow. Older now, his beard streaked with white, his face more shadow than skin. He had not come for thrones, he had not come for glory, but he had come. With him rode hundreds of free folk, men and women hardened by true winter, by the long night, by a life beyond walls and rules. They followed him not because he asked, but because they trusted him more than any king. Jon said little as they crossed into the north. He had seen too many crowns, too many corpses made by them, but word reached him at a riverside inn, whispered between frightened villagers. Queen Sansa Stark had taken the Eyrie. She was laying siege to the south, and worse still, the south had begun calling her the Cold Queen. Jon didn't smile. He didn't scowl, but he knew what came next. If she kept pushing, the realm would collapse for good. There would be no north, no south, only fire and frost and fields soaked in blood. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not to her. Back in Winterfell, Sansa received another raven. This one wasn't a warning. It was a message, no seal. Just handwriting she knew too well. "Meet me at the Weeping Shore, alone. Jon." She stared at the letter for a long time. She remembered the boy who'd left her at Winterfell's gates, the man who'd died and come back, the brother she'd loved but never truly understood, the man who'd always walked the path away from power, just as she'd walked straight into it. Was he here to stop her, or to fight her? 2 nights later, under a sky streaked with cold stars, Sansa rode out with only one guard. The Weeping Shore was quiet, the waves crashing against black cliffs like whispers. Jon was already there, standing by the water. No crown, no sword, just a man cloaked in memory. "Sansa," he said. She didn't dismount. She just stared at him from atop her horse, the wind biting at her face. "You ride with free folk," she said, "but not under my banner." "I'm not here to fight you," Jon said, "but I won't let you tear this realm apart." Her jaw clenched. "I'm holding it together, with fear, with fire, with wolves at every gate." She dismounted slowly, her eyes sharp. They would have burned the north. "Killed us all. I did what I had to do. You always do." Silence fell between them. Then Jon stepped closer. "You took the crown. You made Winterfell a throne. But if you keep marching, if you keep pushing," his voice lowered, "I may have to stand in your way." Sansa didn't flinch. "Then do it," she whispered. "But you'll lose." They stood there a long time, brother and sister, both still, like statues carved by winter itself. Jon's eyes searched hers, looking for something. Hesitation, fear, guilt. Anything to break through the cold mask she wore. But all he saw was iron. She wasn't the girl he had once left behind. She wasn't even the woman who had written to him during the long night. She was a queen now, unforged by silence and loss, and she wasn't going to back down. "You came all this way," Sansa said finally. "Why, to talk me into peace? Or to warn me before you try and stop me?" Jon's voice was low but steady. "I came because I still believe there's another way. one that doesn't end with thousands dead. Thousands have already died, Jon, she snapped. They burned our grain, killed our people in the Riverlands, tried to starve the North into submission. I know. Then don't lecture me about peace. I've done more to keep this realm whole than anyone in the South has in 100 years. He didn't disagree, but he didn't agree either. What happens when you win? He asked. What happens after you take the Vale, the Riverlands, the Reach? Will you rule a land filled with graves? She hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough for him to see the flicker in her eyes. Regret, doubt, then it vanished. I'll rule a realm that remembers, she said. One that understands fear, brings peace better than honor ever could. It was then that Jon knew she had crossed a line. Maybe out of necessity, maybe out of pain. But whatever part of Sansa had once believed in mercy had been buried beneath the snow long ago. The next morning, Sansa returned to Winterfell. She said nothing about Jon. No orders were given to hunt him. No proclamations were made, but the change in her was visible, colder, sharper. She summoned her generals. The Eyrie is ours, she told them. Next is the Reach, eyes widened. Voices rose in protest. Highgarden? Davos asked. That's suicide, Your Grace. Their numbers double ours. And they've dug in. If we push that far south, we expose everything. I know, she said, cutting him off. But if we don't strike now, they'll bring Associ legions through Old Town. They'll choke us out. Then what do? We send a smaller force, she said. Through the Whispering Wood, quiet, fast. We hit them where they're weakest. Not Highgarden, but the supply line from Old Town. Burn their stores, poison their fields, starve the Reach like they tried to starve us. Some in the room looked horrified, others nodded. Meanwhile, in the south, chaos was already blooming. Lord Elric Tyrell received word of the Eyrie's fall just hours before a second raven arrived, one that chilled him more. It bore no seal, just a single sentence. Jon Snow has returned. Elric crushed the letter in his hand. If Jon had returned and wasn't riding under Sansa's banner, it meant only one thing. The wolf pack had broken, and that, he realized, was his chance. The next week, a secret envoy left Highgarden, cloaked in merchant colors. They rode north, not toward the front lines, but toward the wildlands, where Jon was last seen. Their mission was simple: find him, and offer him everything: land, title, command, even a crown if needed. Jon, meanwhile, had not stopped riding. He moved through the torn riverlands like a ghost, helping villages Sansa's war had forgotten, bringing food where the North could not, bandaging wounds her war had opened. He had not declared himself, he had not raised a banner, but word spread anyway. The other wolf, the one who had no throne but still had honor. To some that made him dangerous, to others it made him king. In Winterfell, Sansa felt the shift. It started small, rumors from the Riverlands, a few lords delaying their orders. Then came the ravens that never arrived. Supply lines delayed by bandits. Then came worse. A message from Harrenhal. Your brother has taken in our wounded. We await further orders. She stared at the scroll for a long time. Then she burned it in the hearth. At the scroll for a long time. Then she burned it in the hearth. That night, as snow blew against the tower windows and the candles burned low, Sansa stood alone in her chambers, crown in hand. She could feel it slipping. Not her throne, but the realm beneath it. Jon had become more than a threat. He had become a symbol, and in a war of symbols, even queens could lose everything. The snow didn't stop falling, not in Winterfell, not in the Riverlands, not in the golden fields of the Reach. It was as if winter itself had claimed the land, refusing to melt, refusing to forgive. Even in Highgarden, where flowers once bloomed year-round, the ground was cracked, pale, and bitterly cold. Jon Snow had become more than just a man wandering the south. He had become a banner without sigil, a voice without throne. And that made him dangerous in a way even Sansa couldn't ignore anymore, because people began choosing him. It started in Harrenhal, the garrison commander, loyal to the Starks for 3 generations, wrote a letter to Winterfell and ended it with, "We serve the North, but our hearts lie with the true wolf." Then came a group of Riverland houses, minor bannermen, farmers' sons, hedge knights. They sent no banners to Queen Sansa. They followed Jon. They called him the Wolf Without Chains. He had no army, but everywhere he rode, people rose behind him. In Winterfell's great hall, the council was divided. "We must name him traitor," Lord Umber growled. "Strip his name from the north." "No," Davos said calmly, but with weight. "If we do that, we prove what the South has whispered for years, that the North devours its own." "He's undermining the crown," Lady Reed hissed. "If we let him keep speaking, keep moving, half the Riverlands will break." Sansa said nothing for a long time. Then finally she stood. "I will meet him again," she said. "Not at a council table, not with letters. I'll go myself." "My queen," Davos started. If it goes wrong," she said, "it will go wrong my way." They met in the ruins of Moat Cailin, the ancient fortress between north and south. Broken stone, dead trees, black water, a place no one called home anymore, only memory. Jon arrived first, his cloak dusted with frost. He wore no armor, carried no sword, only his name. Sansa came shortly after, clad in black and silver, her crown braided into her hair. Her eyes carried the storm of 100 sleepless nights. They stood across from each other. No guards, no banners, just blood between them. "You've won their hearts," she said coldly. "I didn't want them," Jon replied. "But they follow you. I told them to stay loyal, and they still chose you." Jon stepped closer. "This war ends, Sansa, now, one way or another." She stared at him. "You've come to take it from me, then? My throne, my realm?" "No," Jon said. "I've come to ask you to give it back to the people." Silence stretched, then laughter, dry, bitter from Sansa's lips. "You really haven't changed." "No," he agreed. "I haven't. That's the problem." She turned her back to him just slightly. "The South would have killed us," she said. "They would have burned the North to the root. You weren't here. You didn't see how quickly they turned. We had one chance to rule, and I took it. And now," he asked softly, "what have you become to keep it?" She didn't answer, but he already knew. He saw it in her face, the weight of every command. Every order that bled the Riverlands dry. Every village burned to keep a border. Every soldier sent to die so she could wear a crown that froze in her hands. "You can still stop it," Jon whispered. "Step down. Let the realm heal." Sansa turned back to him slowly. "There's no healing, Jon. Not anymore. They want a queen who terrifies them. And I became her." He stepped forward again, now only a few feet away. "I don't want your throne." "I never did," she nodded. "But they'll follow you anyway." "I'll disappear again," he said. "If you promise to stop this war, would it matter?" she asked, eyes distant. "It's already burned too long." "You can still be the queen who ended it," he said, voice low. "Not the one they fear, the one they remember." That night, under the black sky and snow-covered ruins, she stood silent for a long time. Then she did something no one expected. She took the crown from her head, looked at it. Just a cold ring of silver and iron, heavy with everything she had done to earn it. She held it out to Jon. "Then what do we do?" she asked, not as queen, but as sister. Jon took the crown, held it, looked at it, then gently placed it on the ground between them. "We let it go," he said. The next morning, a message went out from Moat Cailin to all of Westeros. It was not a surrender, it was a declaration. The war was over. The realm would no longer be ruled from Winterfell, or King's Landing, or Highgarden, but by a council, chosen by the lords and the people alike. Sansa would remain in Winterfell. No crown, no throne. Just the Lady of the North. Jon disappeared again, but his name remained, not as king, but as the man who stopped the North from burning the world. The cold crown was broken, and from its ashes, the realm finally began to thaw. The end to thaw. The end